All right, so I want to talk about number 3 word for this month so far that we've discussed, and kind of like thinking, in terms of just this year. We talked about refocusing, renewal, and now number 3 is prayer. So, what is prayer? Well, I think that prayer is also one of those topics that sometimes can be really confusing, and you'll often hear people say, I'm not good at praying, or I'm not a good prayer. I don't know what to pray. So I think it's something that we need to think about and we need to learn about. And in Luke 11:1, they're saying, Lord, teach us to pray. The disciples are saying, Lord, teach us to pray. And so if they're saying, Lord, teach us to pray, then that must mean that we probably need to be taught to pray, right? Or to learn about it. So as a teacher, I know that sometimes when you're learning about what something is, it's almost more important to learn about what something is not sometimes first. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I just want to talk about what prayer is not. So I kind of wrote down here some things. I'm just going to read off here so I don't forget exactly what I want to say. But number 1, prayer is not magical or mystical. It's not, summoning up God like a genie. That is not prayer. Number 2, prayer is not making demands or manipulating God. Number 3, prayer is not self-therapy or centering. And what I mean by that is that prayer is not led by your emotions. Now, certainly your emotions can be affected by prayer, like when you're praying and you're sensing the presence of God, because when you pray, you're connecting with God. That's what prayer is. But we're not talking about what prayer is today. So your emotions should not lead your prayers, but certainly your emotions can be affected by, by God's presence in your prayer. Number 4, prayer is not a guarantee against suffering. Look up John 16:33. Number 5, prayer is not an opportunity to show off. And I think that so often, or not so often, but sometimes that happens, and sometimes that can make people feel really intimidated. That you have to pray a certain way with certain words, like sounding a certain way, and that's not the case. It's not a time to show off. It's not a performance. So Matthew 6:5, read that. Number 6, prayer is not to impress God with vain repetition. So again, kind of along those same lines of of showing off and just trying to repeat, things over and over again. Matthew 6:7, read for that. And number 7, prayer is not using strange or unnatural speech or trying to give an eloquent speech. And because I wrote here, God is not moved by our tone or our eloquence. That is not what moves him. It's not how fancy you can sound when you pray. That doesn't move God. God is moved by, well, we'll talk about more with prayer and when we talk about what prayer is. But these are the things that prayer is not. So it's not magical or mystical. It's not making demands or manipulating God. It's not self-therapy or centering. It's not an opportunity to show off. It's not a time to impress God with vain repetition. And it's not using strange or unnatural speech patterns, trying to talk, in this fancy or weird way or whatever. Like, those things are not what prayer is. So these are what prayer is not. So think about that. Think about maybe, if you've ever been in situations where you felt intimidated, maybe you've heard other people, or you felt like, I'm not good at praying because I don't sound like that, or I don't do it that way, or whatever. just think about that. Read those scriptures that I gave. So think about these are the things that prayer is not, and just begin to think about what prayer is, what you know that prayer is according to the scripture, and that's what we're going to talk about in part 2 prayer.